It was said that the house at the end of Hollow Street had a soul of its own, dark, corrupted, and filled with the screams of its past. The once proud mansion, now a decaying relic of Ravenshade's forgotten history, was avoided by everyone. The town's elders always spoke of it in hushed tones, as if the mere mention of its name would curse them, but not everyone believed in the tales. Most dismissed the house's history as superstition, a mere collection of urban legends and ghost stories passed down through the generations. But what they didn't know was that the house had a dark past, a past that the town tried to bury, but the house never forgot. It all began with Edwin Gratch, a butcher by trade and a monster by night. Edwin moved to Ravensshade in the early 1900s, setting up shop as the town's primary butcher. His business flourished as he provided the town's finest meats. But behind closed doors, something far more sinister was happening. The butcher's house was not just a place for animal slaughter. It became a place of human torment. The town was small, the people were tight-knit, and the gossip spread quickly. Neighbors would often report hearing strange noises emanating from the house late at night. The sound of screams, the clang of metal against bone, and the eerie silence that followed. There were rumors of missing people, and some townsfolk swore that they had seen dark figures moving in the shadows of the house late at night. But it wasn't until young Maggie Walsh, the town's first ever female journalist, decided to investigate the house that the truth began to emerge. Maggie had always been skeptical of the stories told by the elders. She believed that they were simply trying to scare the younger generation into respecting the town's traditions and fearing the unknown. One evening, she decided to visit the house herself, to uncover the truth once and for all. As she approached the house, Maggie felt an unsettling chill in the air. The house stood tall and imposing, its dark windows reflecting the dying light of the sun. The front yard, once manicured and welcoming, was now overgrown with weeds and wild grass. The paint on the house was peeling, and the wooden steps creaked beneath her feet as she ascended the porch. Maggie hesitated for a moment, but then, determined to get her story, she forced herself to knock. To her surprise, the door opened with a loud groan. Inside, the house was just as she imagined, dark, musty, and decaying. The smell of old meat and damp would fill the air, making her stomach churn. But it wasn't the smell that made Maggie's blood run cold. It was a silence, a heavy, oppressive silence that seemed to press down on her, as though the house itself was watching her. As Maggie ventured deeper into the house, the atmosphere grew thicker. The walls were adorned with old portraits of grim-faced men and women, their eyes following her every move. The floorboards creaked beneath her feet as she walked, and the shadows seemed to grow longer the further she went. It was clear that no one had lived here for years, but there was a sense of something else, something more dangerous. She made her way to the basement door, which was locked. Maggie, ever the determined reporter, found an old key lying on a nearby table and unlocked it. The air grew colder as she descended the narrow staircase into the basement, where the darkness seemed to swallow her whole. The basement was like something out of a nightmare. The walls were lined with old butcher tools, their rusted blades glinting ominously in the dim light of her flashlight. Bloodstains covered the floor, old and dried, but still visible, as though the house had never fully absorbed the horrors it had witnessed. And in the far corner, there was a large, rusted hook hanging from the ceiling, a reminder of the house's true purpose. As Maggie approached the hook, she felt a sharp pain in her chest. She turned around, expecting to see someone standing behind her, but the room was empty. The pain grew worse, spreading through her body, and before she knew it, she collapsed to the floor, gasping for air. The house seemed to close in on her, its walls tightening around her. That was when she saw him. Edwin Gratch stood in the doorway, his face twisted in a grotesque grin. His eyes were cold and empty, and his hands were stained with fresh blood. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Maggie could feel the malice radiating from him, a presence so dark it seemed to smother the very air. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. The shadows in the room seemed to move, swirling around her like a living, breathing entity. And then, from the corner of her eye, Maggie saw something else. The remnants of those who had come before her, ghostly figures twisted and disfigured, stood silently in the corners of the room, their hollow eyes fixed on her. The butcher had claimed them all. In that moment, Maggie understood the truth. The house wasn't just haunted by the ghosts of its victims. It was alive. It fed on the souls of those who entered, trapping them in an endless cycle of torment. Edwin Gratch had never left. He had become part of the house, his spirit entwined with its very structure. Maggie's last breath was choked off by the weight of the house's grip on her. She became another soul trapped within its walls, her body left to rot in the same basement where so many had suffered before her. The house had claimed her, just like it had claimed so many others. The next morning, the people of Ravenshade would find Maggie's body lying in the street, her face twisted in horror. No one would ever speak of the house again, but its reputation would grow. No one was ever brave enough to enter again. The house at the end of Hollow Street stood still, its broken windows staring out into the night. And though the town tried to forget the butcher and his bloody legacy, the house would never let them. It would remain, waiting for its next victim. The butcher's house had a bloody past. It was only a matter of time before it had a bloody future. When Logan Reeves, the ambitious YouTuber, decided to explore the infamous butcher's house, he had no idea that his pursuit of fame and thrills would lead him into the clutches of something far darker than he could ever imagine. The mansion, with its history of bloodshed and terror, wasn't just haunted by the restless spirits of its past. It had been corrupted. The spirit of Edwin Gratch, the butcher, still lingered within its walls, waiting for a vessel to claim. Logan had heard the stories. Everyone in Ravenshade had. The tales of the house's blood-stained history, the screams that echoed in the dead of night, and the souls trapped within its walls. But he didn't believe them. To him, they were just stories, the kind that were good for spooking people and getting views. He had seen enough horror documentaries to know that nothing was as scary as it seemed. He was ready to take on the challenge and show the world what he was made of. Accompanied by his girlfriend, Mia, and his friend, Chris, Logan made his way to the house. They arrived in the late afternoon, the sky already darkening with the approach of night. The house stood as ominous and decaying as the stories had described. Its windows were black voids, and the once grand porch had fallen into disrepair. Despite its dilapidated state, there was an unsettling sense of something alive within its walls, a presence that seemed to watch them, waiting for the right moment to strike. Logan didn't care. He set up his cameras and his equipment, eager to capture every moment. As they stepped into the house, the heavy scent of decay hit them. The floors creaked under their feet, and the air seemed thick with the weight of forgotten memories. The house was still, too still. It felt like they were being watched from the shadows. The trio made their way through the house, their flashlights flickering in the darkness. They entered the basement, where they found remnants of the butcher's old tools, cleavers, knives, and hanging hooks still stained with dried blood. It was here that Logan found something he hadn't expected, an old butcher's apron, hanging from a rusted hook. As he reached for it, an inexplicable chill ran down his spine. He paused for a moment, feeling something stir inside him, but then shook it off as nerves. He slipped the apron on, deciding it would make a good prop for the video. But as the fabric settled around him, something strange happened. At first, it was subtle. His breathing slowed. His heart began to race, but in an oddly detached way. His hands started to tremble, but it wasn't fear. It was something else, something darker. As he moved around, adjusting to the apron's weight, he felt an almost irresistible urge to sharpen the knives that were scattered on the workbench. His hands seemed to move of their own accord, picking up the blades and running them over the whetstone with precise, practiced motions. Mia and Chris noticed a sudden change in behavior. Logan had always been charismatic and energetic, but now he was eerily calm. Too calm. He didn't respond when they called out to him, his focus entirely on the knives. His eyes had taken on a blank, glassy look, like he was no longer truly present. Chris, always a skeptic, laughed it off. "Come on, man. You've had too much coffee today. Let's get out of here before we end up like the others." But Logan didn't respond. His eyes remained fixed on the knives, and his lips parted slightly as he muttered something under his breath. Mia's unease grew. She grabbed Logan's arm, trying to pull him away from the workbench, but he recoiled, his face twisting into something monstrous. "I have to finish what I started," Logan whispered, his voice low and guttural. "The meat needs to be cut." Mia froze. She could hear the change in his voice. It was no longer his own. There was something else inside him, something dark, something ancient. She tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. The air around them grew colder, heavier. Then Logan turned to face them. His eyes were different. They were wide, vacant, as though he were looking to them rather than at them. He was possessed. The spirit of Edwin Gratch had claimed him. The once playful and kind Logan was gone. In his place stood a person who was no longer human, a vessel for something far older and far more dangerous. The butcher's spirit had found its new host. Mia backed away, heart racing. "Logan, stop. This isn't you." But Logan didn't listen. He raised the cleaver, the blade catching the faint light in the basement. His movements were jerky and mechanical, like a marionette controlled by strings. He took a step forward, then another. Chris stepped in front of Mia, trying to block Logan's path. But Logan was faster than he should have been. He lunged, slashing at Chris with the cleaver. The blade missed, but just barely. Chris stumbled back, his heart pounding, and he yelled at Mia, "Run!" Mia didn't need to be told twice. She grabbed Chris's arm, pulling him toward the stairs. But Logan's voice followed them, low and menacing. "You can't leave. None of you can." The house seemed to come alive as they ran. The stairs felt longer, the doors seemed further away, and the walls seemed to close in on them. The house was alive, and it was feeding on their fear, feeding on the possession that had taken root in Logan. As they burst out of the house, gasping for air, Logan's laughter echoed behind them. It wasn't his laugh. It was cold, mocking, and full of malice, the laugh of a butcher who had claimed another soul. And as Mia and Chris ran, they knew the truth. The butcher's house was more than just a haunted building. It was a prison, a place that fed on the souls of the living, trapping them inside its walls, its very structure twisted by the spirits it had consumed. Logan had become part of the house, a new vessel for the butcher's spirit, and as long as the house stood, it would continue to claim more victims. No one knew what happened to Logan after that night. Some say he still roams the house, waiting for the next soul to claim. Others believe he's become something else, a puppet of the house, controlled by the evil spirit of Edwin Gratch. Either way, one thing was clear. Logan was no longer himself. He had become part of the house, and the butcher's possession would never let him go. The town of Ravenshade had long since learned to avoid the house at the end of Hollow Street. Over the years, rumors had circulated, and with each passing decade, the house's sinister reputation only grew. What had once been a place of fear became a myth, a whispered story shared in hushed voices when the wind howled late at night. But despite the tales, there were always a few brave souls who dared to venture inside, seeking fame, adventure, or simply the thrill of surviving something no one else could. And they all shared one tragic fate. They never returned. There was something about the butcher's house that made it unlike any other haunted place. It wasn't just the spirit of Edwin Gratch that haunted its rooms. It was the house itself, alive in a way that no one truly understood. It had become a prison for the souls of the murdered and the lost. But far worse than being killed was the torment that followed. The souls that entered the house were trapped, forced to live their worst moments over and over again, forever imprisoned in an endless loop of fear and suffering. The first to realize this curse were the very people who had lived in the house before it fell into ruin. Edwin Gratch, the butcher, had built the house to be a place of both business and leisure, but it had quickly become something much darker. It was here that he had slaughtered not just animals, but people. And as the years went on, the number of victims increased. But the most disturbing thing about those who had died in the house was that they didn't leave when they died. The spirit of Edwin Gratch didn't just claim their lives. He bound their souls to the house itself. He had created a realm of endless torment where the dead were never free to move on. Over time, the house absorbed their anguish, their screams, their suffering. It grew stronger, feeding off their pain. And once it tasted their fear, it began to crave more. It wasn't long before the house's hunger spread beyond the walls, luring in those foolish enough to enter, trapping them for eternity. One of the first documented cases of this occurred when a group of explorers ventured into the house in the 1950s. The group, eager to document their findings and prove the supernatural claims about the house, enter with high hopes of success. They set up equipment and cameras, laughing nervously as they entered the creaking building, unaware that they were walking into a trap. The group's leader, a man named Henry Lark, had heard of the house's curse, but he thought it was all just superstition. He scoffed at the idea that anyone could truly be trapped by a house. But as the hours passed and they explored the various rooms, something began to change. The air grew heavy. The shadows in the hallways shifted unnaturally. They could hear whispers, distant voices calling their names, voices that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere all at once. It wasn't until they reached the basement that the true horror revealed itself. The basement, long abandoned and filled with old, rusted tools, seemed almost alive. As they descended the staircase, one of the explorers, Clara, screamed. She had seen something, or someone, standing in the corner of the room. But when they turned their flashlights to where she was pointing, there was nothing there. Still, the whispers continued, growing louder, more urgent. Henry ordered the group to keep moving, but Clara's panic was palpable. Her hands trembled as she clutched her flashlight, her eyes darting nervously around the room. It was then that the first vision appeared. A ghostly figure emerged from the shadows, its face contorted in agony. Its eyes were wide and hollow, staring out from a gaunt face twisted with despair. It was a man, but not just any man. He was dressed in the same butcher's apron that Edwin Gratch had worn. His hands were stained with blood, and he held a cleaver, its blade glinting in the dim light. Henry, brave or perhaps foolish, stepped forward, but as he did, the ghost reached out toward him, its fingers curling around the air as though it was trying to grab hold of something unseen. But when it spoke, its voice was not a whisper. It was a scream of unbearable pain and torment. "No escape," the figure croaked, its voice raspy and low. "You cannot leave, none of us can leave." As the words echoed to the basement, the others turned in horror, realizing that the figure was not just some phantom. It was a soul, a victim of Edwin Gratch's slaughter, trapped in the house forever. But it wasn't just this one soul. The room was filled with them. Dozens of figures, all twisted, gaunt, and horribly disfigured, stood in the corners of the basement. Some were covered in blood. Others had their bodies half mutilated, their faces frozen in expressions of sheer terror. They were the lost souls of the butcher's victims, forever bound to the house. Clara screamed, backing away. But as she turned to run, she saw that the door had vanished. The walls seemed to close in around her, and the shadows stretched longer, darker. The souls began to move toward them, their fingers outstretched, their mouths opening to scream their eternal torment. Henry tried to lead his group to safety, but it was too late. The house itself seemed to shift, its rooms twisting and warping, trapping them further. The explorers' attempts to escape were futile. Every door they opened led to another room, a room that looked like the last one, but with a different soul standing in the corner. Each time they thought they had found an exit, they were met with the same ghostly figures. And as they tried to run, they realized they were trapped, just like the others. The house, with its insidious power, had absorbed them all, and now their souls would join the countless others who had been taken by the butcher's house. The souls of the house were not just ghosts. They were eternally trapped in a nightmare, forced to relive their deaths again and again, screaming for mercy that would never come. And the worst part? The house would never let them go. Now, anyone who dares enter the house is met with the same fate. The souls of the butcher's victims still roam the house, their eyes hollow and desperate, their faces twisted in anguish. They beg for help, but the house feeds on their suffering, growing stronger with every lost soul. And once you enter, you can never leave.